Welcome into the New Orleans Saints Postgame Show presented by Verizon right here in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. I'm Carolyn Gonzalez, joined by John DeShazier. Your New Orleans Saints fall to the San Francisco 49ers 48-46. We'll hear from Sean Payton and Drew Brees shortly, but JD, tell us a little bit about what happened in the final 2 minutes of this game.
Well, I mean, a lot of things happened. It was hard to make sense of. Our rookie defensive back, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, had a couple of tough defensive calls on him. One defensive hold on a sack.
Actually, JD, I'm going to interrupt you as we go to Sean Payton.
Yeah, he's on the ball.
Obviously, a back-and-forth game, a tough loss, and so many different momentum swings in that game. You probably have to watch the film 2 or 3 times to, kind of go through the ebbs and flows that it had. Credit San Francisco. They made the plays in the end when they needed to. It was a little surprising to me that it ended up being that type of game. I didn't think it would be. I thought it would be much lower scoring, but that's the direction it went, and you got to score one more. So, any questions?
Do you know why that wasn't defensive or wasn't holding on the Payton?
I don't want to answer one officiating question today, so I won't. Keep going. Sorry.
Did you know what the job Kyle Shanahan did calling plays? It seems like they had the defense off balance.
There wasn't a lot of balance from with the score. There wasn't a lot of balance in either defenses, and they do a good job when you can run the ball like they can, and obviously it creates throws and creates misdirection plays. They're challenging. That's why they're one of the better offenses.
Why go for 2 early in the game after they got the flag and get the 2-yard line?
Flag put us at the 1. That's why.
Was this your best game offensively overall, would you say?
No. Listen, it's a fair question, and yet I would say any game, if you were going to consider it your best game offensively, would have to include a win. So this isn't about just trying to get passing yards or rush. It's about winning games. So no.
In a game like this, when it's high scoring and the team gets the ball last year, wins the game, when you're about to score with 53 seconds left.
Yeah, listen, I know what you're going to ask. You're going to slow down, decide to slow it down when you score 7. I don't know how to do that. Yeah, and then what if you don't have as many plays to score 7? So.
Coach, any thoughts about doubling the field on 4th and 2 next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's 4th and 2, so there's a handful of things you're wanting to do. We kind of played a man underneath safety high defense. They got into a good bunch set, and he was able to uncover it. So I'm sure when we watch this tape, there are going to be a handful of things where, if you played it back over again, you try to find a way to make sure that a guy like him doesn't beat you in the end.
How about the comeback? I know you didn't win, but you now get out the 4th quarter and score twice. You have to feel at least encouraged.
Listen, you're talking to me right after a tough loss, so are you telling me how I'm supposed to feel? All right, I don't feel encouraged. All right, I feel frustrated because we had opportunities earlier in the game offensively to take advantage of field position. We had a number of opportunities. We had missed assignments, so no, I'm not encouraged that way. All right, thanks.
All right, you heard from head coach Sean Payton, who's obviously frustrated with the loss of the New Orleans Saints losing to the San Francisco 49ers 48-46. Again, JD, as we were talking about before we went to Sean Payton, and we will be hearing from quarterback Drew Brees here shortly. It really just came down to the last 2 minutes, and Coach Payton said he's not pleased defensively with this team.
Yeah, they couldn't get stops, but a couple of those were some tough calls. And I know Coach Payton said he didn't want to discuss the officiating. That really is a sign of frustration because you don't want to say something that's going to wind up getting you fined or maybe the organization fined. But certainly there were a couple of calls that the Saints were disagreeable with. 4th and 4 fake punt where Taysom Hill throws a deep pass for Tre'Quan Smith. They don't get a pass interference call or a holding call. The officials explain that, saying when you're in punt formation, those things are allowed in that situation. C.J. Gardner-Johnson had a couple of difficult ones. The rookie defensive back, he gets a defensive hold on a sack on 3rd down when they get off the field. And then when they get a stop on 3rd down, unfortunately he comes up with an unnecessary roughness penalty, personal foul, where there wasn't a whole lot he could do to avoid the contact. Yeah. So, a couple of difficult calls lead to some points where maybe the Saints wouldn't have been in that situation, and yet still, defensively, You've got to be able to get that last stop. It was that type of game, as Coach Payton said, 48-46. So there weren't a lot of stops to be had, but you really had to get one. The Saints couldn't get one when they needed it at the end.
And it seemed like, the defense was really struggling. Even from the start, it was just offense against offense. It seemed like every time you came out on the field, the defense was just getting punched in the face on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it turned into a crazy offensive game. The 49ers, the second best running team in the league, 148 yards a game on 33 carries a game, but they came out and really flipped it on the Saints by just throwing it all around the yard. And Jimmy Garoppolo was fantastic early. And then the Saints, against a defense that doesn't allow you to throw the ball, San Francisco was only allowing 134 yards passing a game. Well, Drew Brees came out and shredded them.
Yeah.
So it turned into an offensive game where you thought it might be a defensive game, but it turned into a shootout really quickly where nobody could really get a stop. And in the second half, each team was able to get a turnover, kind of cash those in. And so, there were a couple of defensive stops, but obviously not nearly enough when you're talking about 48-46.
And we talked about it earlier in the press box. When the Falcons came here to the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, you expected them to pass the ball. They ran the ball. Now it was kind of the opposite here with the 49ers. You expected them to run the ball, and they passed the ball. How do you go against a team that's just going to outsmart you like that?
Well, you got to be able to execute better defensively, and the Saints unfortunately weren't able to. San Francisco came out and did something that was uncharacteristic, as you mentioned. They started throwing it all around the yard, and all of a sudden the Saints were in a defensive position where not only did they not get the stop, but if you don't get those stops, now all of a sudden the offense has you exactly where they want you. So they were able to rip up a couple of decent runs, and even though they didn't get probably the 148 yards, they still were extremely efficient on the ground, whereas the Saints were on their heels. And then the Saints were able to do the same thing to them with Latavius Murray on the ground. And I thought the Saints kept their defense on the defensive, so to speak, on their heels the entire game. But, one score too short now. 46 points is enough to win a game.
Yeah.
That's more than enough to win a game. And we thought the Saints were probably going to be due for an offensive breakout, but obviously we weren't expecting this kind of defense by either team, because these are two of the best defenses in the National Football League, and for them to come out here shows you how efficient these offenses can be.
Well, it seemed like the Saints used every offensive weapon early. You saw 2 touchdowns by Jared Cook, who had to leave the game early with a concussion, which was later ruled a concussion, being hit in the head in the end zone. You had Taysom Hill playing phenomenally. You had Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray. You were using all of your offensive weapons, and like you said, 46 points is enough to win the game, but when you have Emmanuel Sanders coming out and throwing a touchdown pass, there was a lot of tricky plays out there by the 49ers.
Well, the 49ers pulled everything, well, not everything, but they went deep into the bag.
Yeah.
And they pulled out a couple of nice ones. You can't fault them. They came in here and said, you know what, we're going to play to win, and we're not going to be passive about it. We're going to be extremely aggressive. Now they move on to 11-2. The Saints are 10-3. They're a game ahead of the Saints for the number 1 seed, and more than that, they own the tiebreak. So the Saints would have to finish a game clear of them in order to get the number 1 seed now. So that's the difficulty in this situation. The Saints are going to need some help. They're going to need somebody to beat them. The number 2 seed isn't bad. It's not awful. You get a home game, and if it comes to it and you have to play San Francisco in the playoffs, you'd have to go on the road and beat them in San Francisco for the NFC Championship. But obviously you want to be home, and that's the main thing. And that's what they didn't lose it, but the grip loosens a little bit.
Without looking too far ahead, so you're basically saying you need the 49ers to lose a game,
Yeah,
and
you
you
need
the Saints to win out in order to get home field
they
advantage.
need the 49ers to lose too, because they have to finish a game clear of them, because a tie record, the 49ers on the tie break. So that's where they are right now. But forgetting that, this game is going to be disappointing, because this is a game that was there to be won, that they couldn't win, couldn't cash in on a couple of 2-point conversions, and that really ends up costing them on the scoreboard.
Well, 2 failed 2-point conversions, and as you said at the end of the game, Saints went marching down, scored within a minute, Drew Brees to Traquan Smith, and then the 49ers, when you have Jimmy Garoppolo and you have 53 seconds on the clock, that is a lot of time, and of course the penalties didn't help, which the Saints were really good at all the way up until that end of the fourth quarter.
Right down to the end, and then that last one turned out to be so debilitating and so devastating with Marcus Williams with the face mask penalty, because Kittles gets away underneath. If they could have made that tackle right there, they would have been in pretty good shape. And then he gets down the sideline, and in the attempt to tackle him, Marcus Williams grabs the face mask, and you add that yardage onto it, and San Francisco's in chip shot territory. So, those penalties jumped up at the end. And the Saints, as you mentioned, had seemed to kind of figure it out for this whole game until right at the end, where a couple of them bunched up and it ended up costing them.
Well, it's funny, JD. I'm kind of peeking here at the stats, and they nearly look identical. Jimmy Garoppolo, 349 yards, 26 of 35 completions. Drew Brees, 349 yards, the same as Jimmy Garoppolo, 29 of 40 completions. And then their leading rusher had 69 yards on 10 attempts, and our leading rusher had 69 yards. It was nearly an identical game, which the score tells you.
Yeah, it was a crazy offensive game. I mean, I hadn't seen one of these from the Saints in a while, where, you know, it basically turned out to, if the defense can get a couple of stops, just hold on and maybe get off the field once or twice, you know, you might be able to win the game, because it was that kind of an offensive game. And unfortunately, San Francisco's in the same position where they're looking for their defense to get one or two stops here and there. And neither team is going to be happy with what they saw defensively.
Yeah.
San Francisco's going to be happy with the win, obviously, but they're not going to be happy with what they saw defensively.
So we knew coming into the game that you were going to be without Kiko Alonso and you were going to be without A.J. Klein, two of your starting linebackers. So you send in Craig Robertson, Demario Davis, and correct me on the third one.
Probably Stephon Anthony got some reps out there.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it was a difficult situation. I mean, and it doesn't matter. I don't think it would have mattered if A.J. and Kiko would have been out there either, because it was that kind of game.
Yeah.
It just kind of got out of hand, where they were doing some things that were uncharacteristic, and they were extremely effective at it. And now all of a sudden, they get you on your heels, and they can kind of pick from the buffet table. They can get you because they're throwing it, and they get you a little bit softer against the run, and now they can gash you with a couple of runs. And those guys are fabulous at cutting back against the grain and taking it that way. And they've got some guys who can take it to the house from anywhere on the field. So I think San Francisco did a really good job of how they wanted to set the tone here on the road. And they said, you know what, okay, they're expecting to run. We're going to come out throwing it. The big 75-yard touchdown pass from Garoppolo to Emmanuel
14
Sanders,
seconds.
You know, that one hurt tremendously. But again, those were things that I don't think the Saints were expecting to see out of San Francisco, because that's not the character that team had been.
And we'll be hearing from Drew Brees here shortly, who will come to the podium. We'll get over to him as soon as we can. But you said it, JD. I mean, it was just that kind of game for both defenses. But if you had to pick apart the Saints defense, is there one or two areas where you can say they need to do this better?
Well, I mean, they would have wanted to get to the quarterback better. And even though they got a couple of sacks, they didn't get enough pressure on Garoppolo.
Well, they didn't have Sheldon Rankins in the second half. Excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah, exactly. And that shows up, because the secondary, you can cover, but you can't cover forever. And you need to be able to get some pressure on him. They didn't rattle him. They didn't get him off his spots. They got to him, like I said, a couple of times, but they didn't really rush him enough, you know, and speed up his timing. And those are things that affect the quarterback. And if you can't affect him, and if he gets into a rhythm, and Garoppolo got into a fantastic rhythm, then it's going to be difficult to stop any quarterback in the NFL.
Well, we saw earlier before the game that the 49ers had held every number one wide receiver to under 100 yards since week 2. Today, Michael Thomas, who is obviously the Saints' number one wide receiver, to 134 yards. Of course, you want the win, JD, so the yards don't really matter if you don't get the win. But another great performance out of Michael Thomas today. Yeah,
he's been unstoppable this season. The only time he's been slowed down, I think, to any degree was in the Falcons game on Thursday night, on Thanksgiving night. But other than that, I mean, he's been able to put up numbers, and not just because they're gratuitous numbers, but because the Saints have needed him, and he's been able to get open. He and Drew Brees have a chemistry, and he showed some chemistry also with Teddy Bridgewater, but he and Drew really have a thing going to where if Michael Thomas is on the field, Brees knows where he's going to be. He knows where to put the ball, where it's comfortable for him, and Michael Thomas comes up with the football for him time and time again. It was fantastic to watch down the stretch where San Francisco pretty much held him in check until a couple of big catches down the stretch, a 49-yarder and then 20-some-yard touchdown to where Michael Thomas just got loose on him.
Absolutely. Well, we'll go ahead and let you watch some highlights while we wait for Drew Brees, and we'll come back and break down some more of the game.
Four-man rush. Brees going to go right down the middle. He's got Cook still on his feet. Cook to the end zone. Touchdown. He's got the touchdown today. Brees on the fake. Big drop. Going deep again. Cook's open again. And he holds on. Brees looking to throw. Pressure. Going to throw it. Going to score it. Down. Garoppolo has time over the middle. High. And it's intercepted by Robertson. down. Brees going to do exactly that. Touchdown. Kamara in motion. They will simply hand it off to Taysom Hill, who puts down his shoulder and is nearly in. 2nd and 10. Fake to Breida. Garoppolo pressured again, in trouble, and down he goes. Mario Edwards in the secondary. Brees throws, going for Thomas. He's got it, and he's in. Touchdown, New Orleans.
Welcome back into the New Orleans Saints Postgame Show presented by Verizon. Again, your New Orleans Saints falling to the San Francisco 49ers today, 48-46, as we wait for quarterback Drew Brees to come to the podium. JD, when we talked to Kevin Burkhardt on the New Orleans Saints podcast presented by SeatGeek earlier this week, he said that Von Bell was going to have needed to have a big game to help out Demario Davis, and he surely did that today. 8 tackles, 1 sack for Von Bell today.
Yeah, but again, in a game like this, defensively, there are going to be some numbers out there, obviously, but they didn't get enough stops. And that's the main thing they're going to tell you, even in the run game, because San Francisco ends up with a pretty healthy number on the ground, probably about 160 yards or so rushing, and that's not something that the Saints, are accustomed to seeing happen against them. I think they gave up a season-high 180 to Houston in the season opener, and since then, they've been able to pretty much keep teams under wraps, but unfortunately for them, weren't able to keep San Francisco under wraps today. But Von Bell, Demario Davis, those guys did the job, but they couldn't get enough stops in that run game. But San Francisco played it well. I mean, sometimes you got to credit the other guy and say, you know what? They had a really good plan. They executed that plan really well. You knew what they wanted to do, and yet they were still able to do it on the run, but a lot of that was because of how efficient they were in the passing game. I think they really got the Saints on their heels early in that passing game because Jimmy Garoppolo was fantastic early. At one point, he had only had 1 incompletion in maybe his first 12 or 13 passes. He was phenomenal early, right on target, and that got the Saints a little bit off schedule defensively.
Well, as we talked about before the game, we knew that this was going to be tough coming into it. It wasn't going to be easy, but as you move on, we heard Sean Payton say he's not encouraged by the game, but there is a lot of things that they'll have to look at, 24-hour rule, as they approach this Monday Night Football game against the Indianapolis Colts. What is there to correct? As we've said this whole show, there's a lot that you did right offensively, a lot of things that you couldn't do much about on defense, but moving forward to go against the Colts, what do you have to do?
Well, offensively, they're still going to say, even though with 46 points, they're going to say, look, we left some meat on the bone.
Right.
Not a whole lot of meat, but they left a little something out there, and there was some situations where they will want back. You want to take care of the football because the fumble by Alvin Kamara turns out to be huge in this game. Instead of maybe getting a drive where you score or maybe just having a drive where you punt and get a stop, they give the ball up on their own 20, and that makes it a short field for San Francisco to be able to go in and score in a couple of plays. So we want to clean that up, obviously, and there are a lot of things that they're going to look at defensively that need to be shored up. They got out of some run fits. They didn't set the edge on a couple of runs where San Francisco was able to get outside, and those were things they talked about and stressed coming into this game. This is what this team likes to do. These are the things we need to do to be able to stop it, and if you don't do something as, I guess, elemental in their case as setting the edge, then you're just basically saying, okay, we didn't do what we were supposed to do, and this team's going to have a day against you because they got guys who can get on the corner and get down the field on you and make you look pretty bad.
Well, you had the help of Teron Armstead, fortunately, for the Saints on the offensive line, but you also saw a lot more out of Latavius Murray today. We've been seeing that a little bit more of Latavius, a little bit more of Taysom, obviously, after Drew Brees came back and Teddy Bridgewater moved back to the backup quarterback. Do you think that's something we'll see more of moving forward, more Latavius Murray, more Taysom Hill?
Well, I think you'll be getting that balance because teams are keying so much on Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara isn't having the statistical year that we're accustomed to seeing out of him, because teams are saying, look, we are going to take 41 away. We're going to figure out a way to take him away. And San Francisco was fantastic on him in open field, in space, getting to him before he could actually turn and get something going offensively. But Latavius Murray comes out, and even though they know he's a running threat, Latavius Murray, once he gets to that second level, he gets past that line of scrimmage, there aren't a whole lot of linebackers and safeties and cornerbacks who want to tackle that big fella. So you get him out there, and I thought they got some real good positive yardage out of him. He's been a great addition to this team. We've seen a couple of games where he had 30-plus touches, and he did fantastic. So he can carry a load, and he's handling that load well. Taysom Hill, you can throw him out there as a change-of-pace guy. And Taysom Hill took a handoff and really ran and trucked somebody again today. So you can get some other guys out there, but still Alvin Kamara is so valuable to this team because of what he offers in all dimensions, whether it's as a receiver or a runner. He had a 17-yard run today that, you looked at him and said, you know what, that's what we're accustomed to seeing when he goes up and hurdles the guy at the end. But he hadn't had a lot of open spaces to run in this season.
You've seen a lot of changes, JD, on the offensive and defensive line because of Sheldon Rankins going out in the second half. Obviously, you had more Shy Tuttle, more Mario Edwards Jr., and then on the offensive line, you did get Teron Armstead back, but Nick Easton still taking that left guard position because of Andres Pete. But something that we talked about pregame, and Sheldon Rankins mentioned earlier in the week, they needed to clean up the penalties, which they only had 5 penalties for 50 yards. But I know what you're going to say. It's timely.
Yeah,
it's
timely. When they got them. It's when they got them. And I mean, they bunched them all up really right there.
Yeah.
It seemed like all of them bunched up in the fourth quarter, where they all turned out to be extremely critical. And if you have a defensive penalty, that's an automatic first down. A couple of those were on third down, and they gave the Niners extra downs, and they were able to get some scores out of it. Gardner Johnson's personal foul led to a touchdown pass, a short touchdown pass. Marcus Williams' face mask leads to the game-winning chip shot. Now, there's no guarantee that San Francisco doesn't kick that field goal anyway. Maybe they make it from 58 yards, but you'd rather have them attempt it from 58 instead of maybe 18 or 20 or whatever it was. So those are the things that you need to be able to correct, and hopefully the Saints will be able to do that over the course of time. Now, they'll have a couple of days to digest this, sit back on a little bit, kind of think about it, say, okay, these are the things that were mental errors that we should be able to clean up. Because physical errors are a lot more difficult to clean up when a guy just can't do the job. But if it's a mental error where a guy went somewhere where he wasn't supposed to, but he knows where he should have been, then that's something that you can hopefully clean up. And let's say Indianapolis might not be the offensive power that San Francisco was today, so hopefully that'll contribute to it too.
Now, 2 things that I want you to clear up for me without getting fined. The punt play where Traquan Smith was obviously grabbed. Why was that not pass interference?
Official says if you're in punt formation, then basically that contact is allowed against the gunner. And you see that in punt formation, a guy. So he said in that situation, because you're in punt formation, that's a rule, to be honest with you. He had to explain it as a rule. I felt like if you just throw that pass and the guy's interfering with the guy or the guy's holding him, that would be where I had to be educated on, because it was clearly looking for the football and the defender.
Hill, he goes out 10 yards. Drew Brees passes him the ball. Taysom Hill takes off down the field.
But that's an offensive play. They're in
what if Taysom Hill throws it to Traquan Smith, who's 10 yards down the floor?
They're punt formation, and I guess the officials were saying, look, this wasn't a shotgun snap. This was punt formation, and therefore you allow that contact because it's punt formation.
What about the second one on C.J. Gardner-Johnson over here, where it was a personal foul? They said he went helmet to helmet. Can you?
I don't know
like
what
I said,
he can
without
do.
getting fined.
Yeah, I don't know on his knees, and I don't know what C.J. Gardner-Johnson could have done differently. And it looked even then like he
last second turn to try to avoid.
I don't know
him.
what else he could have done in that situation. I mean, if you're a coach and you're different than that, you can't ask a whole lot more of him than that spot, and they have to kick a field goal. And instead, he winds up picking up the penalty, and they end up scoring a touchdown out of it. But I don't know what of those where you say clean up a penalty, but under the circumstances, the receiver's going down, Gardner-Johnson's going in to make a tackle. Yeah. He's trying to turn sideways, and he could have done.
You've seen the maturation of this Saints team over the. Like Sean Payton says, you're not confident after this loss because again you lost. But are you a little bit encouraged with the maturation that the Saints have gone through, especially in that secondary and at that linebacker unit?
Yeah, I mean, until this game, really they played extremely well coming, and so hopefully they'll be able to hold it. Sometimes you're going to have an outlier. This is an outlier game. A 48-46 game in the NFL is an outlier game. This is one. You don't throw it out, obviously. There are things to be learned and things that you gain from it that you like and you dislike, but this is not the type of game that these teams play. So hope and take it with you. Defensively, again, the secondary, there's going to be some cleaning up to do there. And you don't like to see that much space in the secondary. And I thought because it looks a little warped, but I thought they did a really good job of cleaning, especially early in the second half, where they got 3 out of 4 defensive stops. And the one time they didn't get a stop, and it was a short field. So I thought they were out on the field that much, and you're playing under those circumstances, and probably you need the offense to score a little bit. Score. You couldn't afford to kick field goals, really. You probably needed to score touchdowns, and unfortunately, there were some times down there that they just couldn't.
But, excuse me, we're going to go to Drew Brees at the podium.
Listen, I would say to both sides, you know, back and forth, they're a great team. I feel like we're a great team. So this is like a heavyweight boxing match, just trading punches. That's how I would. I know there's some things offensively we can clean up, certain opportunities that would have, you know, made a difference in the game. Obviously, when it comes down to it, but you always have that, right? You always have those moments, and it really comes down to the last, you know, 4 minutes of the game and what happens, and you just want a chance to win. And listen, we had a chance to win, right? And so did they. Unfortunately, they were the ones who came out on top today.
Stylistically, you consider your defense coming into this, and obviously the crazy numbers they put up. Did you ever expected a game like this?
I know what our offense is capable of, right? And so, you know, to me, honestly, just, you know, faceless opponent. Like, I'm just going to turn on the film, and I don't care about reputation. I don't care about statistics. I don't care about anything. I'm just going to play what I see, right? And then develop the game plan that you feel like puts you in the best position to win the game. And they've got a ton of great players, right? And if you're not executing to perfection, you know, they're going to make you pay, right? I felt like we did a lot of things really well today, but there were definitely a few things here and there that could have put us in position for another field goal, right? Which makes a difference at the end. Or extended drive. Don't give them the ball back before the second half, or in the second quarter, which allowed them to go down and get a touchdown before halftime, right? So just, man, so many little things that I know just from an execution perspective on our end would give us even more opportunities.
Two-point conversion proved costly on the second to last.
Yeah.
What happened? What went wrong?
Nobody was open.
Drew, losing Jared early. How much was Jared a part of the game plan today? Losing him early, how much was that?
Yeah, that's definitely a factor. He had 2 catches for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns today, right? I mean, he was impactful, and would have been nice to have him, obviously. Felt like he would have had opportunities. He would have been able to complement everything that we were doing. You know, it just put more on the plate of Josh Hill and Taysom Hill, the Hill brothers. But those guys played phenomenal. They stepped in and played phenomenal. But, yeah, you certainly miss a guy like Jared.
Last year's game against the Rams, you know, kind of back and forth.
Yep.
You saw them
Yep.
in the postseason. You feel like this is a team you're going to probably maybe see down the road here and, you know, maybe get another back at?
Listen, I hope so, because that means that we're accomplishing our goals, right?
You've played in these, you know, top, you know, wild card games before, and you've won some, and then obviously you do something. How does you? I'm not saying your approach changes the week after, but mistakes. I mean, is it more about cleaning things up, or were you guys?
We're better than what we put out there today, and I'm just talking about us offensively. We had chances to score more, and you feel the flow of a game like this, and you know you got to score, and you know, man, you've got to execute to perfection, and you know we weren't quite there. Did a lot of good things, but just not quite enough.
Sean is gambling, the way it works, everybody thinks it's the greatest thing ever, and maybe when he gambles and it doesn't work, starts. The 2-point conversion, you thought that was being on the 1-yard line, you felt good about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, you know you're in that type of game, right? And we were going to play aggressive. Listen, we faked a punt. We brought just about every kickoff out of the end zone, right? And hit on a couple of those, right? man, we got a great return man. Let's see if we can break one of these, right? We get out to the 40 or 50 on one occasion. You know, those are difference makers, right? That's momentum. If you just look at the statistics of you're going for 2 from the 2-yard line versus going for 2 from the 1-yard line, it's a big difference, right? We had a play that we liked, and oddly enough, they misaligned. So they had an extra guy who shouldn't have been there. So unfortunately, the play didn't work. But, you know, that's a big play in the game if we get it, right? So, yeah, listen, we're going to play aggressive. We're going to take chances. We're not going to make any excuses.
So they had a guy on that side of the formation.
Yeah, he should have been on the other side, covered Taysom.
You kind of touched on it, but you were encouraged by the start, because I know throughout the year that the start for you guys offensively hasn't been the way you wanted it. Like getting, 4 touchdowns on the first 4 drives. That's kind of what you're supposed to see, right?
Yeah, I'd like to see more of that. All right, thanks.
All right, of course, you just heard from quarterback Drew Brees, who spoke at the podium. Hard-fought football game, heavyweight boxing match. They said they could leave more. They had more left out there for the offense that they wanted to take advantage of. But an overall good performance from the New Orleans Saints, unfortunately falling to the San Francisco 49ers, 48-46. For John DeShazier, Caroline Gonzalez, thanks for joining us for this New Orleans Saints postgame show presented by Verizon.